Ifeoma is caught stealing from the king. Part 6 of Ifeoma and the Curse Prince. Mama Ifeoma didn't like the idea of her daughter going to see the king. She asked Ifeoma countless times if she had offended the king. When Ifeoma entered the king's quarters, the first thing that caught her attention as she stood by the door to the king's bedroom was a bunch of keys dangling by the king's bedstands. Could they be the keys to the witch's chains? Ifeoma voiced out her thoughts without noticing the presence of the king behind her. "So you are the beautiful maid whose voice calms my son's anger." King Shaba's voice thundered as he entered his quarters. Ifeoma bowed her head in respect for the king. King Shaba strolled into his room and sat on his armchair. "Come and join me." He beckoned Ifeoma and offered her a chair opposite him. "How would you like to be my daughter-in-law?" Ifeoma choked on her own saliva as she heard the king's question. "My king, I don't mean any disrespect, but Prince Sonto is not a man I can marry." Ifeoma humbly spoke the obvious truth. "You are different from all the other maidens, my child." King Shaba tried to persuade her, but Ifeoma turned a deaf ear. The king's final words were for Ifeoma to reconsider his proposal, as it still stands. When Ifeoma got home, she narrated all that happened in the king's quarters to her mother. Her mother didn't like the idea of her daughter getting close to the prince. "Even though the king has been very merciful to us, the undeniable truth is that his son is a madman." Mama Ifeoma murmured. "Mama." Ifeoma shipped in. "Did I lie?" Mama Ifeoma's face got more serious. "I don't want you anywhere near him. Haven't you heard of the rumors going around about how he almost killed a princess from another kingdom?" Mama Ifeoma asked her daughter. "If the king bothers you about his son again, then it's best we leave this kingdom and go somewhere else." That night, the only thing Ifeoma kept thinking about were the keys she had seen in the king's bedstand. She wondered how she would be able to sneak into the king's bedroom to get the keys that might be able to set the witch free. Unknown to Ifeoma and her mother, the news of the king wanting Ifeoma to marry his son had spread throughout the kingdom and had reached the ears of her greedy uncles from her father's side. These Ifeoma's uncles marched to the house early in the morning. "Ifeoma, come outside," one of her uncles shouted. Ifeoma and her mother heard people shouting from outside. Mama Ifeoma went outside to greet the familiar crowd. Ifeoma followed behind. They threatened to make Mama Ifeoma's life miserable if her daughter doesn't accept the king's offer to marry the prince. The same uncles who tormented her mother until she fell sick and also abandoned them to their fate had come back to claim authority over her. Her uncles were only concerned about the gold and diamonds they would receive from the king if the union between their niece and Prince Sonto was successful. Ifeoma's glare was filled with bitterness for her selfish uncles. "My husbands. I would also want to be in-laws with the royal family," Mama Ifeoma stated cleverly. The men believed her and left thinking that her mother would make her do the right thing. When they were out of hearing, Mama Ifeoma dragged her daughter inside her house and whispered, "We will take all the necessary things we need and leave this kingdom tonight. And no one is to know about what we are about to do." Ifeoma prepared and went to fulfill her duties as a royal maid to the prince, while her mother started packing immediately. She arranged things in a very subtle way to avoid visitors or neighbors from suspecting anything. With all this going on in her life, Ifeoma was still thinking about how she would get the keys that were in the king's bedroom. When she was serving the prince his lunch, King Shaba walked in on him. "Could you excuse us for a moment?" The king looked at Ifeoma in a very humble manner. "Yes, my king." She bowed and left. When she was out of the prince's bedroom and in sight of the king's quarters, something came to her mind. Ifeoma thought that the king's conversation with his son would take a long time, so she sneaked into the king's quarters under the pretext of running an errand for him. The guards believed her because she was now a popular maid who was rumored to be the king's future daughter-in-law. After much efforts, she was able to grab the keys. "What are you doing in here?" King Shaba questioned Ifeoma, who turned quickly to see the king and his guards in the bedroom.